Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into a question that has puzzled people for centuries. Did Jesus get rid of the Old Testament law? Did he just erase it? Or did he do something else entirely? Let's get into it.
The confusion actually starts right inside the New Testament itself. If you just read a couple of passages, you might walk away thinking it gives two completely opposite answers about the law of Moses.
So check this out. On the one hand, Jesus says point blank, I have not come to abolish the law. But then his most famous apostle, St. Paul, says that Christ did abolish it. It really does look like a major contradiction. So what's the real story here?
Okay, here's how we're going to break this down. We'll look at why the old law existed in the first place, what that really important word fulfill actually means, and then we'll unpack a simple framework that, honestly, makes everything click into place.
So first things first, we need some context. What was the whole point of the Mosaic Law for ancient Israel? It wasn't just some random list of do's and don'ts.
The law was actually a massive covenant, a special agreement between God and the nation of Israel. It shaped their entire identity, their government, their worship, their day-to-day life. All of it was designed to set them apart for a very specific mission in history, to be the people who would get the world ready for the coming of the Messiah. And this idea of a dividing wall that St. Paul talks about, it's absolutely crucial. You can think of the law as a kind of protective barrier. It kept Israel's unique relationship with God safe. But at the same time, it also created a very clear separation between Jews and non-Jews, or Gentiles.
Okay, so with that in our back pocket, let's zoom in on the most important word in this whole puzzle. And it comes straight from Jesus himself, fulfill. What in the world did he mean by that?
This is where it gets really cool. The original Greek word Jesus used here is plerosai. Now, this doesn't just mean to obey the rules. It's so much deeper. It means to fill something up to the brim, to complete its purpose, to bring it to its absolute, final, perfect form. So according to one of the early church fathers, St. John Chrysostom, Christ fulfilled the law in three amazing ways. First, he was the only person in history to obey it perfectly, without a single flaw. Second, through his grace, he actually gives us the power to live out its moral demands. And third, and this is a big one, he perfected its morality by revealing its deeper meaning, shifting the focus from just what we do on the outside to what's happening in our hearts. And this right here is a perfect example of what that looks like. Jesus doesn't get rid of the commandment against adultery. No way. He elevates it. He shows us that the real point of the law isn't just about avoiding a physical act, it's about the state of your heart. He brings it to its radical, true intention. So how can Jesus both perfect the law and also bring some parts of it to an end? Well, to make sense of this, Catholic tradition gives us a simple but super powerful framework. It helps us see that the 613 laws in the Old Testament aren't all the same.
Okay, this is the key that unlocks the whole thing. The old law can be broken down into three different categories: the moral law, the ceremonial law, and the judicial law. And here's the kicker. Jesus relates to each of these in a different way.
First up is the moral law. Think of the 10 Commandments. Do not murder, do not steal. These laws are permanent. They're universal. Why? Because they're rooted in basic human nature, in truths about right and wrong that apply to everyone, everywhere, always. These laws don't expire. Christ takes these and perfects them.
But the other two categories are a different story. The ceremonial laws were about Israel's specific form of worship, things like temple sacrifices, dietary rules, stuff like that. The judicial laws were basically their civil code as a nation-state. Both of these were meant to be temporary, designed for a particular people at a particular time. And it's this distinction that lets us understand the shift to the new covenant. This is where those temporary laws find their ultimate purpose, and in doing so, they come to their natural end.
St. Paul gives us this brilliant analogy. He says all those ceremonial laws were like a shadow. They were pointing to something real that was coming in the future. But once the real thing, the substance, arrives, you don't need the shadow anymore, right? And that substance, that reality, is Christ himself.
I mean, think about it. All the animal sacrifices in the temple were just a shadow of the one perfect sacrifice of Christ on the cross. Once that ultimate sacrifice was made, the shadows just weren't needed anymore. Their purpose was completed. They were fulfilled.
Okay, so now we can circle all the way back to those first two Bible verses from Matthew and Ephesians. With this framework in mind, we can see that there's actually no contradiction at all. See, when Jesus said he came to fulfill the law, he was talking about the whole shebang. He perfected the permanent moral law, and he brought the temporary ceremonial and judicial laws to their final goal. And when Paul said Christ abolished the law, he was zeroing in on those temporary ceremonial rules, that dividing wall that were no longer needed and kept Jews and Gentiles apart.
So, in Christ, the Old Covenant finds its ultimate completion. The whole purpose of the Mosaic Law is achieved, and that opens the door to a new covenant, not just for one nation, but for every single person, Jew and Gentile alike.
All right, so that's the theology. But what does it all mean for us today? If parts of the law are gone, what's left? Well, Jesus makes it incredibly simple. Jesus tells us that the entire moral law, everything that remains and has been perfected, can be summed up by these two commandments: love God and love your neighbor. This becomes the new core principle, the lens through which every other moral question is supposed to be seen.
And that kind of leaves us with a final, big question to chew on. What if the whole point of this journey, from the old law to the new, isn't just about trading one rulebook for another? What if it's about a complete and total transformation of the human heart, reorienting it entirely around love?